Trump is set to become the third U.S. president in history to be impeached by the House of Representatives.
Democratic lawmakers are expected to prove two impeachment charges against the Republican president today, also tonight.
Australia enjoys the hottest day on record as the national average temperature reaches a high of nearly 41 degrees Celsius.
The Supreme Court of India says that it will take up petitions against the new citizenship law next month as anger against it grows.
A court in Japan orders a TV reporter to pay $30,000 in damages for a journalist who accused him of rape.
And coming up in sport, the clock ticks down towards the 2022 World Cup as Qatar is preparing for a dress rehearsal in the form of the Club World Cup as clubs and teams arrive in Doha.
And as Opposite News turns 3, we'll look back on some of the best moments from the past 3 years. Good evening and welcome to the Opposite News at 6. US President Donald Trump is on course to become the third US president in history, to be impeached later by the House of Representatives.
Democratic lawmakers are expected to approve two impeachment charges, namely abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, against the Republican president today.
Mr. Trump is scheduled to face a trial in the Senate next month, but that chamber is controlled by members of his party, and it is unlikely to vote that he should be removed from office.
The president has called the process an attempted coup and a witch hunt. On the eve of the vote, Mr. Trump argued he had been denied his rights from the beginning of this impeachment scam in a 6-page letter.
He has blocked top aides from testifying before lawmakers in the House and declined an invitation to appear himself.
On Tuesday, Democratic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi announced the vote on both charges.
Mrs. Pelosi wrote to colleagues that impeachment is one of the most solemn powers granted to us by the Constitution and called it a quote-unquote very painful moment in our nation's history.
Members of the House will meet from 9 o'clock local time or 1400 hours GMT on Wednesday. Votes on both articles of impeachment are expected between 1830 and 1930 hours.
As the House prepares to vote, President Trump will fly to Michigan for a Merry Christmas rally along with Vice President Mike Pence.
With us now live from Washington is our political correspondent, Talking Paul. First of all, Paul, what exactly are the charges?
The first charge against Donald Trump is abuse of power. It accuses the president of trying to pressure Ukraine to smear his political rival, Democratic presidential contender Joe Biden. Mr. Trump and his conservative allies have laid around evidence that while he was US Vice President, Joe Biden encouraged Ukraine to fire its top prosecutor in order to stop him investigating a Ukrainian gas company that employed his son, Hunter Biden, as a board member. Democrats say Mr. Trump tangled $400 million of US military aid and the prospect of a White House meeting for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as bargaining chips to pro-US ally into announcing a corruption inquiry into the Bidens. The second charge is obstructing Congress. Mr. Trump is accused of failing to cooperate with the House impeachment investigation. The president has denied withholding US aid to benefit himself politically and maintains it was appropriate to ask Ukraine to look into alleged corruption. Now, how do people, Americans in particular, as well as political parties in the US, support impeachment of Mr. Trump? Are they divided? Do they have common ground? Well, Tom, the US appears to be split on the process. The collection of national polls from 538 shows that 47.3% back impeachment, while 46.5% do not support it. Going to political parties now, we're talking a pretty strong 82.6% support for impeachment from the Democrats, while 43.6% of independents, that's less than half of them, have their support. And quite unsurprisingly, the Republicans, which is the party of Mr. Trump, do not back impeachment by a flat 90%, and therefore opinions do fall on the party lines.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much for joining us. That was Talking Paul, our political correspondent in Washington.
Heading to Australia now, and the contrast experience is hottest day on record, with the national average temperature reaching a high of 40.9 degrees Celsius.
The Bureau of Meteorology said extensive heat on Tuesday exceeded the previous record of 40.3 degrees set on the 7th January 2013.
Taking the average of maximum temperatures across the country is the most accurate measure of the heat wave.
The record comes as the nation battles a severe drought and bushfire crisis. Forecasters had predicted the most intense heat would come later in the week, meaning the record could be broken again.
As hundreds of fires rage, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been criticised for his response to the natural disasters and his government's climate policy.
Australia heated up this week as the masterful air swept east across the continent, with meteorologists forecasting severe to extreme heatwave conditions.
Several individual heat records for towns and cities have already been shattered. On Tuesday, places across the nation's centre recorded temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius.
At the start of the week, Perth, the capital of Western Australia, recorded 3 days in a row above 40 degrees, a record for December.
The dominant climate driver behind the heat has been a positive Indian Ocean dipole, an event where sea surface temperatures are warmer in the western half of the ocean and cooler in the east.
The difference between the two temperatures is currently the strongest in 60 years. The warmer waters cause higher than average rains in the western Indian Ocean region, leading to flooding and dry conditions across Southeast Asia and Australia.
India's Supreme Court has said it will take up a clutch of petitions against a new citizenship law next month, as anger against it grows.
The court told the federal government to prepare a response to the petitions, but the law has not been stayed.
The decision comes even as Prime Minister Narendra Modi reacted with defiance to widespread protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act.
The law offers citizenship to non-Muslims from 3 nearby countries.
The Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party government says it will protect people from persecution, but critics say it's part of the Hindu nationalist agenda to marginalize India's more than 200 million Muslims.
Adding to the fears is the government announcement that it plans to carry out a widespread exercise to weed out infiltrators from neighboring countries.
Given that the exercise relies on extensive documentation to prove that the ancestors lived in India, many Muslim citizens fear that they could be made stateless.
However, Mr. Modi said the law will have no effect on citizens of India, including Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Christians and Buddhists.
The Prime Minister also told his supporters at a rally on Tuesday that the opposition was spreading lies and rumours, instigating violence, and uses full force to create an atmosphere of illusion and falsehood.
Home Minister Amit Shah echoed the sentiment to media, saying, "Both my government and I are firm like a rock that we will not budge or go back to all these citizenship protests."
Stay with us here on Office 7 News, still to come after this break.
A Japanese court orders a TV reporter to pay $30,000 in damages to a journalist over accusations of rape.
Later in sport, as the 2022 World Cup news, Qatar prepares for a dress rehearsal in the shape of this year's Club World Cup as the football circus arrive in Doha.
Office 7 News marks its 3rd year of broadcasting with the best scenes from the last 3 years.
And the weather tonight brings more rainfall everywhere, so don't forget your umbrellas. Welcome back to Office 7 News. A Japanese court has ordered a high-profile TV reporter to pay 3.3 million yen or $30,000 in damages to a journalist who accused him of rape.
She also alleged that Noriyuki Yamaguchi raped her in 2015 while she was unconscious.
Prosecutors said that there was not enough evidence for a criminal case, so Ms. Ito brought a civil case.
Ms. Ito has become a symbol of the Me Too movement in a country where people rarely report sexual assault.
30-year-old Ms. Ito said that she was so happy on the verdict. She also held up a sign which read victory after the verdict was announced.
But in a news conference hours later, Mr. Yamaguchi said he planned to appeal and he again denied the rape allegations.
According to Ms. Ito, 53-year-old Mr. Yamaguchi, who is said to have close ties to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, invited her to dinner to discuss a possible job opportunity in 2015.
She suspects she may have been drugged, saying that when she gained consciousness, she was in a hotel room and he was on top of her.
Miss Ito was an intern at news agency Reuters when the alleged rape occurred.
Mr. Yamaguchi was then Washington bureau chief for the Tokyo Broadcasting System, a major media firm in Japan.
Investigations were opened but then dropped by police, citing insufficient evidence.
Ms. Ito said police forced her to enact the alleged rape with a life-size doll while male officers looked on.
A 2017 government survey found that only 4% of rape victims reported the crime to the police.
Now it's time for the sport news around the world with Talking Angela. Angela?
Hello Dan, welcome to the Sport News. Well, the top story right now is that with just under 3 years away for the 2020 World Cup, the Capitals preparing for a jersey rehearsal as English Premier League club Liverpool and Brazilian team Flamengo arrive in Doha for the 2019 Club World Cup. Shiny new air-conditioned stadiums, a specially constructed fan park, a new state-of-the-art metro, and a charm offensive to woo those who still harbour reservations as to the tiny oil-rich state's ability to host the sport's biggest competition in 3 years' time will all be on show. No small detail has been led a chance. Inside the fan park, there'll be music from the Cabin Beatles, as well as the Lightning Seeds, the UK band whose anthem, Football's Coming Home, has become part of English football folklore. Beer, normally restricted to hotels, will also be on sale as fans scatter in rather comfortable temperatures of around 25 degrees Celsius during the daytime. Amina Al-Ali, the chairwoman of the country's Liverpool supporters club, Qatar Reds, says visitors to the Gulf state can expect a warm welcome. For Qatar, this is a test run as it prepares to handle thousands of fans from across the globe. It's also an opportunity to show the world that it is ready and able to cope with the demands placed upon it. It will hope the tournament is more impressive than its hosting of the recent World Athletics Championships, which was criticised for failing to attract enough spectators. In other news, darts player Fallon Shark entered the history books Tuesday when she became the first woman to beat a man in a World Championship match. Shark battled back from 2 sets to 1 down to seal the victory over Ted Evans at the Professional Darts Corporation event at Alexandra Palace in London, sending the crowd wild. The PDC Men's World Championship features 96 players each year, and there are 2 spots for women. Hold on a second, on a bit short on time. Anyway, Shark served the decision to allow mixed competition that women just need more opportunities to prove ourselves. She said that she didn't remember much about the match, but enjoyed every minute of it. The 25-year-old has become one of the top female players in the world, and her star continues to rise. Shark became the 5th woman to compete in the World Championships, and the 4th since a pathway for qualification was created for women this year. She qualified by winning the UK and Ireland women's qualifying event in November. I'm so sorry, Angela, but I have to leave you there right now because